Hi, I'm the Global Runner and I'm trying to see if I can still run fast aged 51. So far I've run a 16:01 5k, a 33:02 10k, and now the next step is trying to go under 2:30 in the marathon aged 51.
Hi, I'm the Global Runner, and for those who've been watching a while, you'll know that I'm 51 years old and I'm trying to get under 2:30 in the New York City Marathon this year. Now, I've had a couple of failed attempts at other marathons, so this year, this attempt, I'm trying to do something a little bit different. So the purpose of July is to run as many miles as possible. And in the video at the start of July, I was talking about whether or not I could get 400 or maybe even get beyond 400 miles for the month, which seemed aggressive. That's like nearly 100 miles a week. Even I can do that maths. And so I wasn't sure if I would get there, but I did. And I can confirm that I actually did 438 miles, which is 706 kilometers in July, which I'm really happy with. The body's feeling great. I've been getting regular physio, so I think that helps, but everything seems to be tolerating that workload. And I haven't done much speed at all, but certainly I'm feeling super fit and I feel like my body has adapted to that mileage really well. So later on in the video, I'll go through the dangers of high mileage as I see them. But before we do that, let's look at this week's training, which was another good, relatively high mileage week.
So this week's training was a slight reduction in terms of mileage on last week's training. Last week I did 110 miles and this week I did just under 100 miles. But again, I'm not really going for actual mileage, I'm just going for bigger miles and was trying to get over sort of 700 this month. So there was a big session on Saturday and the biggest session of the week obviously was on Sunday when I did just over what I wanted to do. I wanted to do 21 miles, but I ended up doing 22 and a bit miles, and we did 20 minutes at the end of some serious pace. So I was happy with that and the way it worked out. I wanted to highlight Tuesday because this was an interesting one. I ran 10 miles and my training readiness actually went up in this run. So that's really a sign of fitness, I think, when your training readiness goes up after a 10-mile run. And then in the evening that day, I did 15 by a minute outside. The paces weren't stellar, but they were okay. The rest of the week you can see was pretty decent. I enjoyed doing the 5 by 3 minutes and I'm just starting to introduce a little bit of speed, but next week I'll be backing right off the mileage and introducing way more speed. Now let's look at my experience when I've been increasing mileage.
So those who've been following along will know that I have run a lot of mileage recently. In fact, last week I did 110 miles or 177 kilometers. And there are certain things which have sprung to mind which I want to share with you guys as to what happens, in particular the dangers of this high mileage. Now we all know injury is one of them. Higher risk of injury the more mileage that you're doing. I'll deal with that at the end, but let's dive into the dangers of high mileage as I've seen them. So the first thing I want to talk about is underfueling, and this is a big one. I think this is worse than the injury because I think if you underfuel, you can potentially create injuries like stress fractures and those types of things. So underfueling is a real issue when you're running significant mileage. And I've found recently on runs that no matter how much I eat during the day, I can and often do feel super weak on runs, like I've run out of fuel. And so for that reason, I've started taking gels with me on every single run, just in case. Like the other day, I had to stop in at work and raid the chocolate drawer just to make sure that I got through my run. And I felt 100% better after it. But fueling and making sure you're eating enough when you're running high mileage is my #1 danger. So underfueling is the danger. Danger number 2, I think, is overwearing your shoes. Like, I have a lot of shoes and I use them all the time and I track the mileage on them. But if you're running like 100 to 110 miles a week, you could easily go through a pair of shoes in 3 or 4 weeks. No problem at all. And so I've been checking out the sales, particularly on Nike, to make sure that I'm getting the shoes at half price whenever I can, because you go through them really quickly. And I think the danger is that if you don't change your shoes regularly, like if you're used to changing your shoes every 3 months, say, when you're doing higher mileage, obviously you're going to get through them more quickly. And if you don't change them out quickly enough, that increases the injury risk. The danger number 2 is not changing your shoes often enough. Danger number 3 is fatigue, in particular, not sleeping enough. And it's interesting because my watch will track my sleep, and the more mileage I do, the more sleep I find that I need. But equally, the higher my sleep scores seem to be. Like, I regularly hit the 90s, I think because I go to bed exhausted by the end of the day. But I really aim to get at least 8 hours of sleep a night wherever I can. And I find that when I'm getting better sleep, then my training readiness on my watch really improves. Sleep is a huge factor when you're training this much. And I do tend to find that it's cause and effect, I guess. I sleep better as a result of the high mileage, but I need the sleep because of the high mileage. And danger number 4, I think, is relying on your watch too much. Like, we were just talking about the watch and all the stats that we have nowadays, and they are undoubtedly useful. But I'm in a period where I am just focusing on high mileage, and I've got to say, my watch absolutely hates me. It just says that I've been maintaining for a period of time. It says my VO2 max is decreasing. It actually said to me when I looked at my endurance score that my ability to run long distances has significantly decreased in the last few weeks, which can be pretty demoralizing. But you've got to remember that the watch is just looking at the data that it has in front of you, and it doesn't know the plan. So remember the plan, and the plan for me at this stage is to just hit big miles, and the watch will catch up when I start doing more even training. I think the watch is most upset by the fact that I'm only doing long, easy miles and not really doing much in terms of extra work or tempo work or interval work or that type of thing. And so that's where it sees an imbalance in the training. So I understand it, I understand the algorithm, and I understand what it's doing, but it can be demoralizing seeing those things. So one of the dangers is relying on your watch. Don't forget, your watch is going to hate you. And then finally, obviously, the 5th danger that we have is the risk of injury. The more miles we run, the greater the risk of injury. Now, the things that I do to combat this is I make sure I eat well, I go to the physio regularly, and I get massages regularly. I think I need that in order to keep the body moving the way it should, keep the mechanics moving properly. And I try and go there from a preventative measure rather than only going when I need things to be fixed. And I do think that that is the right approach to make sure that I get ahead of issues and I deal with issues before they become problems and before they become injuries. So that's the way I try and look at those sorts of things. I do actually wonder whether or not these super shoes allow people like me with imperfect form to run more miles and to tolerate higher mileage. Like back in the day when we were all running in like plimsolls with 10 mils of stack height, you couldn't really run that many miles before the imperfections in your running form showed and you got injured. Nowadays, I genuinely feel like with these super shoes, which sort of show you the way to run and force you to run in a particular way and in a more efficient way, I do wonder if these allow people like me who definitely do not have perfect form to run more mileage and to tolerate more miles. I think they do, and I appreciate them for that. I mean, there are always the obvious answers in terms of avoiding injury, like don't increase your mileage too dramatically. Some people talk about 10% week over week. I like to think of 3 or 4 weeks of building and then a week down. The other thing that I've noticed is not all miles are equal when you're talking about injury. Like if I ran interval runs every day, I think I would be injured by now. And the zone 2 easy miles, I think you can tolerate a lot more. So I think part of this high mileage program is making sure that you don't run too hard. Every now and then I'll throw in an interval session to make sure that I'm not losing that side of things. But generally speaking, the vast majority of these miles are at an easy pace. And I think that allows the body to tolerate it without getting injured. And that ultimately is the plan. There we have it, the 5 dangers of high mileage as I've seen them. Let me know what you think. Have you been running high mileage recently? And how have you handled the increased mileage? How's your body handled it? And do you have any tips or tricks to making sure that you don't get injured when you're increasing mileage? Let me know in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe, like, and comment, and I'll see you very soon.